Eddie Van Halen walked into a children's hospital carrying a guitar case worth more than $2 million. Inside room 307 was a 14-year-old boy who had 3 days left to live. What Eddie did with that guitar, and what the boy whispered 3 days later, changed how Eddie saw his entire legacy. It was November 1991, and Eddie was at the height of his career. Van Halen's latest tour had just wrapped up, grossing over $40 million. Eddie's custom Frankenstrat guitar, the iconic red, white, and black striped instrument he'd built with his own hands, had become one of the most recognizable guitars in rock history. Collectors had offered Eddie over $2 million for it. He'd always refused to sell. But on November 12th, Eddie received a letter that made him reconsider what the guitar was really worth. The letter came from Sarah Williams, a mother from Portland, Oregon. Her handwriting was neat but shaky, and parts of the paper were wrinkled, as if tears had fallen on it while she wrote. The letter began, "Mr. Van Halen, I am writing to you about my son Marcus. He is 14 years old, and his doctors say he has less than a week to live. I promised him I would try." Eddie read the entire letter standing in his driveway, unable to move. Sarah explained that Marcus had been diagnosed with osteosarcoma, bone cancer, 18 months earlier. They'd tried everything: surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. The cancer had spread to his lungs and spine. 2 weeks ago, the doctors had said there was nothing more they could do. They sent Marcus home with hospice care. But 3 days ago, Marcus's condition had deteriorated so rapidly that they'd brought him back to Dornbecker Children's Hospital in Portland. The doctors were keeping him comfortable with morphine, but they'd been clear. Marcus had days, maybe a week at most. Sarah wrote about her son's one great passion in life: guitar. Marcus had started playing at age 8, teaching himself by watching videos and listening to albums. His favorite guitarist, his absolute hero, was Eddie Van Halen. Marcus had covered every Van Halen song, spent hours perfecting Eddie's tapping technique, and plastered his bedroom walls with posters of Eddie and his Frankenstrat. "Marcus has one wish," Sarah wrote. "He wants to touch a real Frankenstrat before he dies, not to own it, not to keep it, just to hold it once, to play one riff on the guitar his hero created. I know this is impossible. I know you probably receive thousands of requests, but I promised my son I would ask. I promised him I would try to make his last wish come true." At the bottom of the letter, Sarah had included the hospital's address and her phone number. Eddie stood in his driveway for 20 minutes just holding that letter. He thought about all the guitars he owned, the collection worth millions. He thought about the Frankenstrat sitting in his studio, the guitar that had made him famous, but was, in the end, just wood and strings and paint. Then he thought about a 14-year-old boy lying in a hospital bed, dying, dreaming about touching that guitar just once. Eddie walked into his studio and picked up the Frankenstrat. He'd built this guitar in his garage in the late 1970s, using a Charvel Stratocaster body that he'd bought for $50. He'd painted it himself, adding the iconic red, white, and black stripes with masking tape and spray paint. This guitar had been with him through every major moment of his career. It wasn't just valuable, it was irreplaceable. Eddie put the guitar in its case and made a phone call. The next morning, Eddie Van Halen was on a private plane to Portland, carrying the Frankenstrat. He hadn't told his management, hadn't told the band, hadn't told anyone except his guitar tech, who'd insisted on coming along to make sure the guitar wasn't damaged during the flight. Sarah Williams was in her son's hospital room when her phone rang. When the nurse told her Eddie Van Halen was downstairs and wanted permission to visit Marcus, Sarah thought it was a cruel joke. "Eddie Van Halen is here," the nurse repeated. "He's asking if he can come up." Sarah's legs gave out and she had to sit down. Her husband Robert, who'd been dozing in the chair beside Marcus's bed, jerked awake. "What's wrong? Is it Marcus?" "Eddie Van Halen is here," Sarah whispered. "He's actually here." Marcus was asleep, the morphine keeping him sedated most of the time now. His face was gaunt, his body frighteningly thin under the hospital blankets. Various tubes and monitors were attached to him, tracking vitals that were slowly, inevitably declining. Sarah looked at her son and made a decision. "Send him up," she told the nurse. "Please send him up now." 5 minutes later, Eddie Van Halen walked into room 307. He was wearing jeans, a black t-shirt, and carrying a battered guitar case covered in road stickers. He looked nervous. "Mrs. Williams," Eddie said quietly. "I'm Eddie. I got your letter." Sarah couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears already streaming down her face. Eddie looked at the boy in the bed. Marcus was so small, so fragile looking. He had his mother's dark hair, but it was thin and patchy from the chemotherapy. His skin was pale, almost translucent. But even in sleep, there was something about Marcus's hands, the way his fingers moved slightly, as if playing invisible chords. "He's a guitarist," Eddie said softly. It wasn't a question. "He lives for it," Robert Williams said, finding his voice. "Lived for it. He wanted to be just like you." Eddie set the guitar case on the empty chair and opened it. The Frankenstrat gleamed under the fluorescent hospital lights, its iconic striped pattern instantly recognizable. Sarah gasped. Is that the real one?" "It's the one," Eddie confirmed. "The one I built, the one I've played at every show for 12 years. "You brought it here," Sarah whispered, "for Marcus." "I'm not just visiting," Eddie said, looking at Marcus's sleeping face. "I'm leaving it with him. The guitar is his now." Robert stood up abruptly. "Mr. Van Halen, we can't accept that. That guitar is worth—" "I know what it's worth," Eddie interrupted gently. "What I'm asking is, can you wake him up? I'd like to meet him while he can still talk to me." The next few minutes were chaotic. The nurse adjusted Marcus's morphine dose, bringing him slowly back to consciousness. Sarah held her son's hand, whispering to him that something special was happening, that he needed to wake up. Marcus's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused at first, confused. "Mom?" His voice was barely audible. "Marcus, honey," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "You have a visitor, someone very special." Eddie stepped into Marcus's field of vision and smiled. "Hey, Marcus, I'm Eddie." Marcus stared, his eyes slowly focused, recognition dawning. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I heard you wanted to meet the Frankenstrat," Eddie said, lifting the guitar from its case. "So I brought her to meet you." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Eddie Van Halen," he whispered. "You're Eddie Van Halen." "That's right, and you're Marcus Williams, the guitarist." Eddie sat down on the edge of the hospital bed, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment. "Your mom tells me you can play Eruption." I tried," Marcus said, his voice weak but clear. "Never got it perfect." "Nobody gets it perfect," Eddie said with a grin. "Not even me half the time." He positioned the Frankenstrat carefully across Marcus's lap. "But here's your chance to try again, on the actual guitar." Marcus's hands trembled as they touched the guitar. His fingers found the strings, and even though his body was weak and failing, his muscle memory kicked in. He played the opening notes of Eruption, slowly, imperfectly, but with pure joy radiating from his face. Eddie watched, and in that moment, he understood something he'd never quite grasped before. The guitar wasn't valuable because collectors wanted it, or because it was famous. It was valuable because it could do this. It could give a dying boy a moment of pure happiness. Marcus played for maybe 30 seconds before exhaustion overtook him. His hands fell away from the strings, but he was smiling. "That was the real Frankenstrat," he whispered in wonder. "I played the real Frankenstrat." "And you played it well," Eddie said. "But Marcus, I need to tell you something important." Eddie took the guitar and stood up, and for a terrible moment Marcus thought Eddie was going to leave. But instead, Eddie walked to the corner where Marcus's parents stood, spoke to them quietly for a moment, then returned to the bed. "Your parents and I have been talking," Eddie said, "and we've decided that this guitar needs to stay with you. It's yours now." Marcus's eyes widened. "I don't—" "What?" "The Frankenstrat is yours," Eddie repeated, "for as long as you want it." "But I only have—" Marcus's voice broke. "I only have a few days." "I know," Eddie said gently, "which means these might be the most important days this guitar ever has. Better that it spends them with someone who truly loves it than sitting in my studio." Marcus began crying, but his hands reached for the guitar again. Eddie helped him position it, and this time, Marcus didn't try to play. He just held it, his thin fingers tracing the iconic stripes, feeling the wear and tear from years of performances. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered. Eddie stayed for 3 hours that first visit. He played songs for Marcus, told stories about the guitar's history, showed Marcus tricks and techniques. When Marcus had the energy, they played together. Simple chord progressions, nothing fancy, just the pure joy of making music. Before Eddie left, he made Marcus a promise. "I'm staying in Portland for a few days. I'll come back tomorrow if you want." "Please," Marcus whispered. Eddie came back the next day. And the day after that, for 3 days, Eddie Van Halen essentially moved into room 307 at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. He brought his guitar tech, who set up a small amp so Marcus could hear the Frankenstrat through speakers. He brought CDs and photos. He brought more guitars so Marcus could try different sounds. But mostly, Eddie just sat with Marcus and talked. They talked about music, about life, about everything and nothing. Marcus's parents later said it was the most animated they'd seen their son in months. The morphine kept the pain manageable, and Eddie's presence seemed to give Marcus a reason to stay alert, to stay present. On the third day, November 15th, Marcus's condition began to change. The doctors told his parents that this was likely the final stage. Marcus was drifting in and out of consciousness more frequently. His breathing was becoming labored. Eddie was there when Marcus woke up for what would be the last time. It was late afternoon, and the hospital room was bathed in golden light from the setting sun. Marcus's eyes opened, and he looked directly at Eddie. "Eddie," Marcus whispered, "I need to tell you something." Eddie leaned close. "I'm here, buddy." "What is it?" Marcus's voice was barely audible, but his words were clear. "Thank you for showing me that the music matters more than the guitar." Eddie felt his throat tighten. "What do you mean?" "Everyone told me I needed the perfect gear, the right equipment," Marcus said, each word an effort. "But you showed me it's not about what you play. It's about why you play. You gave me the most famous guitar in the world. But that's not what mattered. What mattered is that you played with me. You made music with me." Tears were streaming down Eddie's face. "Marcus, I'm not scared anymore," Marcus continued, "because I know the music continues. Even when I'm gone, the music continues. You taught me that." Those were the last words Marcus Williams spoke. He slipped into unconsciousness shortly after, his hand resting on the Frankenstrat. His parents were on either side of his bed, and Eddie sat in the corner, his head in his hands. Marcus died peacefully at 11:47 p.m. on November 15, 1991. He was 14 years old. The Frankenstrat was still on his bed, his fingers still touching the strings. After Marcus passed, Sarah Williams asked Eddie if he wanted the guitar back. Eddie looked at the instrument, at the boy who'd held it during his final hours, and shook his head. "That guitar did what it was supposed to do," Eddie said quietly. "It gave someone joy. That's worth more than $2 million. I want you to keep it." But Sarah had a different idea. She asked Eddie if they could donate the Frankenstrat to the hospital, to be displayed in the pediatric wing as a reminder that music heals, that art matters, that famous people can be kind. Eddie agreed, but on one condition. They would create a small music room where sick children could come and play instruments. The Frankenstrat would hang on the wall, a centerpiece, but there would also be other guitars, keyboards, drums, instruments that kids could actually use. Today, there's a music room at Dornbecker Children's Hospital called Marcus's Place. The Frankenstrat hangs on the wall under glass, but surrounding it are dozens of instruments that sick children can play whenever they want. A plaque beneath the famous guitar reads, "Music Continues," given by Eddie Van Halen in memory of Marcus Williams, who taught us that art matters more than fame. Eddie Van Halen never built another Frankenstrat. He played other guitars, other instruments, but he said the original had served its highest purpose. It had given a dying boy 3 days of happiness. In interviews, Eddie rarely spoke about Marcus directly. The loss affected him deeply. But he did say this once in a magazine interview in 1992. "I used to think success meant filling stadiums and selling albums. Now I know success means using your gifts to help one person, even if it's just for 3 days. Marcus taught me that my music matters, but not for the reasons I thought." Eddie established a fund that provided musical instruments to children's hospitals across the country. He visited sick children regularly, though he rarely publicized these visits. Those who worked with him said the experience with Marcus had changed Eddie's entire perspective on fame and success. The story of Marcus Williams reminds us that the true value of art isn't measured in dollars or fame. It's measured in moments of connection, in the ability to bring joy to someone who desperately needs it, in the courage to give away what's most precious to us because someone else needs it more. Eddie Van Halen gave a dying boy the most valuable guitar in rock history. But what Marcus gave Eddie was even more valuable, the understanding that music doesn't matter because it makes us famous. Music matters because it connects us, heals us, and gives us the courage to face even the darkest moments. Marcus Williams lived only 14 years, but in his final 3 days, he taught one of rock's greatest guitarists the most important lesson of all. We don't own our art. We're just temporary guardians of it, responsible for passing it on to those who need it most. The Frankenstrat still hangs in Marcus's place at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. Every day, sick children look at it and are reminded that a rock legend thought their happiness was worth more than $2 million. And every day, those children pick up guitars and keyboards and drums and make music, continuing the legacy that Marcus and Eddie created together. Because that's what music does. It continues. It heals. It connects us across the barriers of illness and fear and even death itself. If this incredible story of sacrifice and human connection moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that the most valuable things in life can't be measured in money. Have you ever given up something precious to help someone else? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the legends who showed us what really matters. And if you ever find yourself in Portland, Oregon, stop by Dornbecker Children's Hospital, visit Marcus's place, look at that famous guitar hanging on the wall. And remember that real success isn't about what we achieve, it's about what we're willing to give away.